I'd fed both crews for 20 years, and in all that time, I had never once seen Rio Tachibana go quiet. That changed on the last Tuesday Cafe Hatsu was ever open. The night he laughed at my oldest friend's grandson and walked out owing him something he couldn't pay back with money. The sit-down had been called for 7 o'clock, after a dinner rush I no longer had reason to expect. 6 tables, 12 chairs, and somehow 22 bodies crammed into a diner built for half that many. The wolf pack lined along one wall in their matching jackets, the driftwood crew scattered along the other in whatever they owned. I stood behind my own counter because it was the last neutral ground left on this block, and because somebody had to keep the kettle going even on the night everything was supposed to end. 3 weeks, Rio said, tapping the lease notice I'd taped to the register like it was already his. 3 weeks, and this whole building's gone, and that corner lot goes up for grabs. I want it settled tonight. No scuffles in the street like we're kids. Old Mr. Hoshino, who'd run what was left of driftwood since his knees gave out, said the corner had always been theirs to watch, going back to his father's father. That the wolf pack hadn't earned a single foot of it, just outlasted everyone smaller. Rio laughed at that the way he'd laughed at most things that week, like the whole negotiation was a formality he was bored of attending. That was when his eyes landed on the piano. It had been at Tsuko's, sitting under a dust sheet in the corner for the years since she'd passed, because nobody in this place had touched a key since the funeral. Rio pulled the sheet half off with one finger, the way you check a used car for rust you already knew was there. "Heard your gopher's been in here after closing," he said, not looking at Hoshino anymore. He was looking past him, straight at the boy by the door. "Polishing keys instead of fixing chains. That true, Sora?" Sora, he mightn't look up. He never did. 22 years old and built like he was still waiting to grow into himself. The one who ran messages, patched bicycle tires, carried Hoshino's groceries up 3 flights when his knees wouldn't take the stairs. The one both crews had quietly agreed, somewhere along the way, didn't count for much. A couple of the younger Wolfpack boys snickered. Even on his own side, nobody moved to stand near him. "Tell you what," Rio said, and that was the moment the whole room actually went still because everyone there knew that tone of his. "You play something on that rec. Actually play it, not banging around for a laugh, and I walk away from the corner tonight. No fight, no more arguing, it's yours clean." "Can't do it," he shrugged, easy as breathing, like the outcome was already decided. "Your whole crew folds into mine by Friday. Everybody. No exceptions." Hoshino was on his feet before the sentence finished. "He's not part of this. He doesn't even." "He's standing right there," Rio said. "Looks like he's part of whatever I say he's part of." I watched Sora's shoulders the whole time this happened, the way you watch a kettle for the moment before it sings. He didn't argue. He didn't look at Hoshino for permission, or at the Wolfpack boys laughing into their sleeves. He just stood, walked the length of the diner in the kind of silence that has weight to it, and lowered himself onto the bench his grandmother used to sit on. I'd known that boy since he was small enough to nap against Itsuko's hip while she practiced. Even I didn't know what was about to happen. He laid 2 fingers on keys that hadn't sounded since the funeral. The wolf pack along the wall were already grinning at each other, already composing the joke they'd tell tomorrow on the corner that would soon belong to them. Then he played 4 notes. Just 4. The simple, plain 4 that anyone who's ever sat near a piano for 10 minutes in their life would recognize. The first thing every child is taught. Light as a question and just as small. A ripple of laughter started on Rio's side of the room. That's it. That's what he'd kept 22 people standing here for. Sora let the laughing happen. He didn't flinch, didn't rush. Then his right hand kept going somewhere those 4 notes had never gone before. The familiar little tune folded into itself and came apart the way a paper crane comes apart if you keep unfolding it. Except what was underneath wasn't blank paper. It was something his own hands had built. A left-hand figure rose underneath, slow and rocking, like harbor water against the pier outside, like Itsuko's teacups used to rock against their saucers on a windy night when the whole building shuddered. The laughing stopped first on Rio's side. I watched it go out face by face down the wall, like someone switching off lights room by room down a long hallway. I had heard him practice once, months ago, through the kitchen door after closing, and told no one, because some things a boy keeps to himself until he's ready. What came out of him in front of both crews that night was bigger than anything I'd caught through that door. He built the melody up through the register the way the harbor cranes build a hull, plate by plate. One hand laying foundation while the other found a line that climbed and circled and refused to resolve. Refused, leaning into a dissonance and holding it a beat past comfortable, until it finally dropped into a phrase so plain and so aching that Hoshino's hand found the back of a chair just to have something to hold on to. Nobody in that room moved. I had a kettle whistling on the stove behind me, and for the first time in 20 years of running that counter, I let it go. He wasn't performing. That was the thing I understood watching him, the thing that put a hard knot in the back of my throat. He wasn't playing for the corner, or for the wolf pack, or really even for us. He was talking to a woman who used to sit on that same bench, telling her the diner was closing in 3 weeks, and he didn't know any other way to say goodbye to it. Somewhere in the middle, the melody turned tender, the way a voice goes soft saying a name out loud after a long time of not saying it. And I understood that half the boys in that room, green jackets and black, Wolfpack and Driftwood both, were only a few years past being kids who used to chase each other down these same 6 blocks for nothing more than the thrill of being chased. The music didn't care which jacket anyone wore. It just asked the room to feel something, and the room, every last one of them did. He brought it home slow. No flourish, no big finish to prove a point, just the left hand settling lower and lower, like a boat coming in past the breakwater, until the final chord hung in the air on its own, and he lifted his hands and let the silence be the silence. No performance left in it at all. I counted 12 seconds because I needed something to do with my hands while I waited to see what would happen. 12 full seconds where Cafe Hatsu, on the last week it would ever exist, held 22 people who didn't make a single sound. Rio broke it, not with words. He stood first, chair scraping back hard against the tile. And for one terrible second I thought, here it comes, here's the part where he laughs it off and takes the corner anyway, because that's what men like him do when they get caught feeling something they hadn't planned on feeling. Instead, he crossed the floor, slow, the way a person walks towards something they're not sure they're allowed to touch, and stood over the piano looking down at Sora, like he was seeing him for the first time in the 4 years their 2 crews had spent circling each other over 6 blocks of pavement. "That a real song?" he said finally. "Or something you just made up on the spot to mess with me?" "Mine," Sora said. First thing he'd said all night, quiet but steady. "Hers, really. I just finished it for her." Rio nodded slowly, the nod of a man recalculating something that had been fixed in his head for years and had just stopped fitting. Then he did something not a single person in that room expected, Wolfpack or Driftwood. He reached into his jacket, pulled out the least notice Hoshino had spent the last hour arguing over, and tore it clean down the middle. "Keep the corner," he said. "Don't want it anymore." A few of his own boys shifted on their feet, confused. They'd come for a turf war and were about to leave with nothing to show for it, which to street kids is its own strange kind of currency to lose. Rio wasn't finished. "What I want," he said, and now he was looking past Sora, past the piano, at me, at the cracked tile, the chipped counter edge, the handwritten closing notice taped beside my register. "Is this place not closing in 3 weeks?" Nobody laughed this time. Nobody even breathed loud. "My crew can cover half the rent through the winter," he said. The way a man negotiates something he's pretending is simpler than it actually is. "Driftwood covers the other half. However you want to split it among yourselves, none of my business. The corner stays whoever's name's already on the lot. I genuinely don't care anymore. I just want to hear him play something like that again, sometime that isn't tied to a bet I never should have made." Hoshino looked like a man who'd spent 4 years bracing for a fight that had just walked itself out the front door without throwing a single punch. He crossed to Sora and put a hand on his shoulder, the kind of hand that says more in one motion than 4 years of overlooking a boy ever had. I won't pretend everything between those 2 crews healed itself over one song in one evening. Old grudges don't dissolve that easy, and I've fed this neighborhood long enough to know better than to promise a fairy ending. But something shifted that didn't shift back. The corner sign still carries Driftwood's name today. The diner is still open, rent covered by an arrangement between 2 crews I still don't fully understand and have stopped trying to. Some Friday nights now, when the dinner rush thins, you'll find Sora at that piano with both jackets, green and black, leaning against my counter listening, no wager on the table, nobody keeping score, nobody composing a joke for tomorrow. I asked him once, not long after, why he never told either crew what he could do. Nobody asked, he said, like it really was that simple. Maybe it was. I think about that more than I'd like to admit. Some slow nights now, wiping down a counter that very nearly didn't survive long enough to be wiped down at all. How a boy nobody thought to ask had been carrying something inside him worth more than 6 blocks of pavement 2 crews spent 4 years fighting over. And how it took one dusty old wreck of a piano and one cruel little wager meant to humiliate him to finally get him to set it down where the whole street could hear.